Right. So I'm Swati, as Anshul introduced. I'm senior lecturer and university teacher fellow at De Montfort University, also deputy director on the Doctor of Business Administration program, which means that I look into why to use AI in teaching and also why to use and how to use AI within research, probably a topic for next time. But what we are going to do today, or rather, I should say, what we are not going to do today is this. So this talk is not about becoming an AI expert. I'm not going to endorse any of the AI tools. So at the end of the day, or at the end of the talk, it's not about which tool and why to put an AI. It's or just to add prompt generated images or text and promote practice. So this is not about that. This is about a pedagogy first approach and why we should prevent technology from undervaluing our unique style. So what I'm going to present the use cases would be to suggest how I enhance my style of teaching with AI and not completely replace it. I think Anshul mentioned, so I presented in one of the very first EmpowerED seminars, and that was about, following your style pedagogy. And this is kind of a second phase to it, that I now know who I am and how I'm now elevating my practice through AI. So to start off with, there's a workshop that I conducted last year, and a couple of you might have been participants because I have been inviting a few of the colleagues and friends around the entire higher education sector. So I'm a Lego Serious Play facilitator. So I wanted to approach this question around what AI means to me or what AI means to the participants creatively. So Lego was the medium that I used. So this was a workshop which centered around four key stakeholders, not just academic staff, but professionals, people from the leadership team, and also wider community people, who would be doing some sort of charity work or working with other sort of schools or colleges. So a few interesting insights came out from this workshop, and I thought I'll start my presentation discussing those insights. So first of all, anyone who's been through a Lego Serious Play workshop or session would know that we often start with the question of pick up a break or pick up a character that you would metaphorically associate with a topic. So this time it was AI, and funny enough, a number of the colleagues picked a monkey as the metaphor, which meant AI is completely disruptive. A couple of them also picked sharks, tigers to suggest how dangerous AI could be. But also there has that sort of, beauty feature associated, so how beautiful a tiger's stripes could be or the colors could be. So mixed reactions, cautious, careful, disruptive, dangerous, these kind of metaphors were really, really used most oftenly. Interestingly, all the colleagues, all the participants had this view that as soon as you approach or use AI within your practice, it's first of all very, very important to know where you are and where you want to be. So that sort of self-awareness is very important when it comes to, for that matter, any sort of technology. One of the most interesting or my favorite insight was that if we are using AI, or if for that matter, our students use AI, does it mean that we are sort of leap forwarding a skill, or we are ignoring a skill completely, or a skill is completely lost? So let's say, for instance, I use or my students use AI for planning or brainstorming. Does it mean that the planning skill, is completely lost? So could it mean that I am leap forwarding into the design without following the process? The other thing was that AI is useful, it's important, it's becoming a part of the ecosystem, but the regulations are very, very important. So it is necessary to have frameworks so that people know that how they're using it responsibly, especially now more so in case of research. So ethics around AI, responsible usage, what sort of value added it's giving to us and to our students, whether it's about productivity or whether it's just about time saving. So this workshop, which was part of my academic innovation project, kind of helped me kickstart on these questions as to how and effectively and responsibly I can embed AI within my teaching practice. So, to start with the actual topic as to why and how I embed AI into my teaching, my first question always to myself, and I would ask you all to spend a couple of seconds on thinking who you are. So, I am an ace. Sorry, not this one. I don't want to blow up my trumpet. So let's cross that. I am an ace, which means I'm an active, constructive, creative educator. So I see myself following constructive pedagogic approaches and creative pedagogic approaches within my classroom. Once I've identified myself, once I know what is my signature or unique style of teaching or signature pedagogy, that's when I then go on to deciding that how I'm going to embed AI so that it enhances my approaches. So I don't first use the tool. I first look at my foundation or put core pedagogy at the core of my understanding, and then pick the tool and its use case. So that's what I'm going to follow today as well. I'm going to suggest how I feel or why I feel I'm an active educator, and then how I've enhanced that approach using different AI techniques. So active learning, I'm pretty sure it's not new. Everyone knows about it. It kind of something that John was also mentioning in his talk. It's one where you involve your learners or your participants actively. So they are the ones who are constructing the knowledge. It's based on the philosophy that learning happens when everyone's actively involved. So you have to identify the interests, the needs, the curiosity of your learners, and make sure that they match with the resources, content, or the learning material. A number of examples around active learning is in-class activities, role play, flipped classrooms, something that became very, very popular after pandemic, ice-breaking activities during the induction week, games, quizzes, puzzles, all those approaches or examples fit into active learning. Of course, active learning has a major drawback, or it could a disadvantage, I should say rather, is that it can become unpredictable. So you don't know how your participants or your students would react. So it could be that you've planned something and no show. That means reduced attendance or students not engaging could completely make your activity flat. But having said that, once I know that this is the forte, or this is my forte, or this is my passion, or this is my strength area, where does AI come in from here? So before I do that, there was this very interesting resource that I've been using a lot. Is 100 Ideas for Active Learning. It's an open resource, so please feel free to have a look at that. So with AI, so whether it's ChatGPT 4, whether it's Claude, whether it's now Gemini, advanced version or the basic version. So I'm not going to speak specifically about the tool or suggest that there's a subscription required. But what I usually start with is I often give AI my speaker notes, which mean my session notes or my lecture notes, and ask it that if students were to remember only one thing from the class, what would that be? Or what questions could student ask? So kind of it helps me to begin with the process of becoming a more thoughtful, active educator. So clearly lay out the goals, the constraints, and the options that I'm going to go with in the classroom. Active learning, because I want to involve each and every student of mine within the process. I want to ensure that none of the learners in the classroom are left behind. Depending on how your students are. So I understand that I teach on corporate programs, and my students could be diverse learners here who may not have economics as their background discipline. And me being an economics educator, often my questions are very much focused around terminology that's economics or finance related, like for instance fiscal policy, monetary policy. So to start off with, if I'm giving a question and need to ensure that the group work that's going to take place around that question would ensure that it involves each and every learner, I often go and ask an AI tool that can you simplify this question for me, because my learners may not have economics as their background discipline, and it does that. So the way AI is helping me here is to get close to my learners more easily and more coherently to before I begin with those active learning approaches. So before I go in with an activity, or before I go in with a game-based activity or a crossword or a presentation, I already have that sort of background check around my students and understand where they fit in, or how they would behave in that particular session. So that's where one of the ways AI supports my delivery with AI. And now this is not just for staff, but this has a parallel for students. So you've done a presentation, you have to present that to students. How you could build on that presentation, so specific prompts around presentation skills. So it could be around content, how you can shape the content for a set of students who are economics focused or non-economics background, whether the content on the slides is clear and concise, what challenging questions could be asked, whether the graphs or the visuals are clear, and whether they specifically relate to a particular concept. So how effective the slides are. So I often go and ask these kind of prompts to AI to give me that feedback around my presentation and how I could augment the design of my presentation, whether it's content or whether it's through visuals. So kind of ensuring accessibility there before I present those slides to my students. Now, this could also have a parallel to students. So imagine students are doing group presentations, and they could use these kind of prompts or use these a way of interacting with AI to ask what kind of questions could be asked at the end of their presentation, how they could improve the content on their presentation, or whether it fits into the assessment question that's been asked. So this has a parallel for both staff and students. But what I'm trying to suggest here is that use AI to make yourself a good presenter, um, or an engaging presenter that already understands the needs of the student. In terms of a very specific example around AI is using ChatGPT. Well, the reason why it raised an eyebrow was because, of course, this is a paid version. But so I asked it to create a puzzle for my students. Well, I used a different example here. I wanted to use something that I did for PG Cert colleagues, so that everyone in the room in this session could interact. So you give it a few words, ask it to create your puzzle, and this could become the first interactive or ice-breaking activity with the students. It gives the description, so I didn't write any of these hints. I just gave it a word, whether it's pedagogy, whether it's innovation, or whether it's a virtual learning environment. So just give it those central points or the core words, and it writes the entire description for you and creates this crossword. So the idea here is that not just it helps you go prepared into the session where you're going to do an active or an interactive sort of activity with your students, but it also can help you generate these puzzles or quizzes quickly. The second sort of approach, which I lay quite a bit of emphasis on, is I'm a constructive educator, which means I enjoy constructing knowledge in the classroom with my learners. That means all the learners do something. Now, active learning and constructive learning are not mutually exclusive. There are a number of parallels here. But the idea centrally is that the learners need to do something when they are in the classroom. So it builds on their previous knowledge, on their previous experiences, the concepts that they've learned in the previous lecture. And there's a huge amount of social interaction that goes in. So learning is contextual, it's not passive. It's not static, it's very, very dynamic. So that sort of constructivist approach, if you think you are a constructivist, then this is something you must be very, very familiar with. Now, one of the styles that a constructivist might just be using is storytelling or narratives. So are you a storyteller? If you are, that means you can build or construct truths, facts, experiences, rather than providing absolute information. So I, for one, as an example, I know that there's a colleague of mine. He works at UCL, a brilliant economist. But what he does is he takes students around for UCL walks. That's what we call it. So we would visit places where economic thinkers would have come up with those age-old theories, and then discuss and narrate information in a more interesting, colorful way, rather than making it as a dry subject and you would discuss economic history in the classroom. So if you're a storyteller, but of course, the fact that you understand that there must be a central idea for your story, how well you can enrich the session through characters, through in-depth understanding around your concept. But as a storyteller, what's the kind of approach that I often use is I've been using AI for digital storytelling, which means so the idea came up like this. If you give AI, for that matter, GPT-4, or if you've been using your institutional account for Copilot, or now if you've been trying any other tools, um, so if you ask the AI tool to create an image just using one word, so let's say I give the word credit crunch, it often doesn't come up with a perfect image. You need to give it a bit more description. And that led me to think, what if I ask AI to build a concept scene by scene? So it writes me the entire story, and then use that response as the next prompt for an image description. And that's what led me to start using AI for digital storytelling. So instead of just going in and describing the concept with probably numbers and data as economics would look, I have now started using digital storytelling. So, of course, the text on the image is misspelled. So, ignoring that, probably maybe just crop that. This is diminishing marginal utility. So, start with something very, very basic. So, as you can see, a couple of slices in the beginning, positive utility, go on to a next few slices, the utility starts to fall, and by the end, I cannot even finish the pizza. So AI has been very, very useful. Now, we would think that what does it mean? Do students need to subscribe to GPT-4 or paid version of any of the AI tools? Because personally, I do not endorse students using even the free tools such as Canva or Shutterstock. Reason being, nothing's for free. The cost may be in terms of the data that gets collected. So what was done here is I've got subscription to GPT-4. So I asked my student to write the narrative for me, to write the plot for me, to give me the characters, to give me the time period. Once they've given me that, during the live session itself, I would put that in GPT-4, ask it to give us scene by scene the entire storyboard. Once the scenes come out as a response, the students could then check, does it relate to the concept they have understood, or could we change the scenes somehow? So they do all the description, they do all the narration around it. The only thing I provide is I provide them the medium to then form it into a visual image. So we've been trying a couple of them. Let's say, for instance, this is one of the images that is part of a storyboard around global financial crisis. So showing meltdown, falling housing prices, and banks going into bank closure because of bank runs. Another interesting thing is often within global financial crisis, you've got credit crunch. So you can see that it's very tightly squeezing the money, which means it's not readily available to be lent out. So what I'm suggesting here is that if you are a constructivist and if you enjoy storytelling, try AI for storyboarding, or try AI to generate these images to enhance that sort of creativity in your classroom. If not a storyteller, there are other ways in which I've been looking at how can constructivist be mapped with AI. So one of the ways is concept mapping. So concept mapping is basically the idea where you organize, identify, and put the ideas and form connections within it, right? So it's more sort of a visual way or a visual relationship between your different strands or practices. Now, concept mapping and constructivist are highly compatible because they help you to understand at which stage and at which node you could add another tool, or in this case AI, and how would they blend perfectly with what you want to achieve. So concept mapping leading me to constructivist approach. Now I've listed out a few of the principles that are embedded under constructivism. So whether it's about constructing knowledge, whether it's about fostering collaboration, whether it's about critical thinking, you want to encourage creativity, or you want to understand sort of a bigger picture. So at each of these principles, AI or large language model could be integrated in a seamless way. So, for instance, for when we talk about encouraging creativity, that's where you could have some sort of idea generation tools. When you're talking about critical thinking, as an economics students, my students would look at data driven insights. I would give them a case study, forecasting example. In terms of collaboration, yes, there could be a number of collaborative platforms or interactive learning environment to construct that knowledge. So, what I'm trying to suggest here through these two approaches is whether you're an active educator or whether you are a constructive educator, first, the important thing is to identify what is your specialism or what is your unique selling point. Once you've identified, then try to bring in the tool in the most effective way to help you augment what you want to do and achieve. So, on that note, maybe it might be a very short presentation, but what I want to suggest here is that we need to plan ahead. We need to think first, what is our unique selling point? Where is our specialism? So, what is our signature pedagogy? And once you've identified that, it becomes much easier to find use cases with the help of AI tools. And it may not be necessary at the end to even use an AI tool. You might just be doing these things without the AI tools, but often it just adds that sort of color and depth to your classrooms and make you more productive.